My name's Maya, and I'm an Impact and Development Manager for Bipolar Scotland. So, we are a national charity that supports people living with bipolar across the whole of Scotland. We primarily do peer support and have a real focus on self-management as well. We've got an amazing service called Beyond Diagnosis, which supports people who are newly diagnosed, and Lynsey is one of our fantastic peer workers who works as part of that service.
Yeah, I'm Lynsey and I'm one of the peer support workers. I've been with Bipolar Scotland for almost 2 years now, and it's a great service. It's really, really fulfilling to work on, and we get such good feedback for that particular service.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that makes our service so unique and what makes peer support in general so unique and different to other maybe supportive relationships people have had is the fact that it is based on that, shared experience and it's not a sort of professional relationship that can maybe feel a little more superficial at times. And because it is so strongly, based on that real human connection, then just like our relationships outside of our professional lives, they can feel complex. You bring people together with different personalities, different experiences, different moods. Um, and that can sometimes lead to discomfort arising in the relationship. So I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more about your experience with that, Lynsey, and what that feels like for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things that can pull up discomfort within the relationships that you build. And one of the things that I have found is when people become very emotional, because you're an empathetic person, you have to be to do this job. It can be quite emotional for you. You can take on how that person's feeling, and it can be quite overwhelming at times. Um, Other things that come up are, if you have different values from somebody else, or perhaps their life views are so far removed from your own that you just can't connect with them, there can be that level of discomfort there. And I've learned to kind of put it to the side while you're doing your session with that person so that you can remain present with them. But that's definitely something that you gain with experience. And it can take a little while to get there, but you do. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned through peer support is that when you have that discomfort, you have to you have to put it aside for that moment and come back to it afterwards.
I think that's something I've definitely found from working together with you, Lynsey, is that you are so self-reflective. And so that can lead to some really great conversations between us. But I'm wondering, going back to what you spoke about there about, maybe working with a peer that you're just struggling to connect with. I know sometimes we'll have people who come into the service and it can be really difficult for them maybe to open up. And sometimes they maybe aren't sharing a lot of information. And I think that can definitely lead to a level of discomfort. And I feel like that's one of those times where you're having to have that really tricky role of, being mindful of that person's feelings and what they're experiencing and their level of comfort. But you're also having to like internally navigate what can feel quite uncomfortable. And I'm wondering, what do you do in the moment in that relationship if you're feeling that sort of disconnect? What sorts of things do you try?
Think moving away from specifically bipolar and mental health and trying to build that relationship up by asking people questions about their life outside of their mental health journey. What does your life look like? What is your family circumstances? Do you work? And pull it back to something just a little bit simpler and not quite so overwhelming for that person. And I think it's a really important way to build a relationship. Um, I find that really, really helpful if you're in that moment where you're just not finding a connection with the topic you're there to talk about.
Have you ever had situations where you've maybe had to like be quite open with the person about, there's maybe something in the relationship that doesn't quite feel right and you've had to sort of address that with them? I'm wondering, how that might feel because there are times when we maybe have to, sometimes when there's discomfort, it is because maybe there are some gentle boundaries that we need to have a look at. maybe it's about managing their expectations. Like maybe they've come into the service or thinking that peer support is something that it's not. And I'm just curious about your experience of maybe having some of those difficult conversations with people.
Yeah, I think initially something that I learned quite quickly in doing peer support was that to establish a really good relationship within your first session with somebody is to be very clear about what your sessions are about, what peer support looks like, and what that means for you both going forward. And I think if you can establish that very early on, then actually what it does is it reduces any discomfort going forward with that. Um, in terms of having to have conversations with people, there can be a level of anxiety around that. You know, you don't want to upset anyone or make them feel uncomfortable in any way. So you do have anxieties in going into that, but it's about looking at the sort of language that you use with them. And I think, questions such as, how are you feeling about the peer support? Do you think there's any better way that I can support you? Or is there any other topics that you would like to touch on and maybe pull away from things that are a little bit uncomfortable? Um, there's definitely ways round discomfort in the relationship that you can try before you get to a point where you feel like this isn't working for both of us. And I think that is having these open conversations with people, despite there being a level of discomfort there. Um, yeah, I think having those open conversations are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we often talk about this idea that if it's not working for one person, it's not working for both people. And thinking back to, the sort of values of peer support as well, that mutuality and, honesty and that really speaks to that as well. But I think as a manager, one of the things that I'm so conscious of is that discomfort in a peer relationship, it is normal. It will happen. And as you've shared, Lynsey, like there can be great learning and growth that comes from that. But I'm also so mindful that discomfort doesn't always have to be endured. Like there might be situations where actually we discover that maybe a peer might work better in a different relationship with a different member of the team. And that's okay as well. So I think for me it's about, creating an environment where all of you as peer workers feel safe to open up to me about any concerns you're having or any kind of, barriers to connection within peer relationships so that we can work really collaboratively together and look at, well, this is what you're feeling, what might the person be feeling, what could we do that would maybe make this a better experience for everyone. Um, and so I think it's not just about having those formalized supervision sessions in the diary every couple of months, but it's also about those informal opportunities for just being able to debrief or share what's on your mind or get a second opinion. And I know, Lynsey, you often speak about the support you get from your colleagues as well, who are doing the same role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important is to be able to go to someone at the end of a session that maybe has made you feel uncomfortable or just like maybe your relationship with that person isn't going the way that you would like it to go. I think self-reflection is really important, but part of self-reflection is being able to share your emotions with other people and maybe look at things from a different perspective. Because I think when you're uncomfortable, you don't always look at things in the way that you would want to. So it's important to be able to bounce off of someone, is this normal to feel this way? Is there any suggestions that you have for me to deal with this? And I think that step of having these open conversations, it can be really, really difficult. But if you know that you've got a little bit of support from, your colleagues or your manager, and they've maybe been able to give you some hints and tips on specific language to use or a way of approaching something, it makes it that little bit easier than just sort of going into it by yourself because you've got a bit more confidence when you can share your thoughts with somebody else compared to going into it feeling like you're on your own.
Lynsey, I would really love to know whether you had like one bit of wisdom that you could maybe share with people that are watching this video and perhaps, in a place where they're doing peer support, but maybe having to navigate discomfort, what would you share with them?
I would say one of the most important things that I've learned and gained from peer support is how cathartic it is for me to share my experiences. It's a peer relationship. It's not you going into it to tell someone how to get better or how to manage their mental health. It's very much a shared experience. So I think, allow yourself to be open with your peers, allow yourself to be vulnerable with them because actually you get a lot out of that. And it can be really, really helpful to build that strong, trusting relationship with your peers to be able to do that. And just that, go into working in peer support and go into your sessions in peer support looking at things from a very positive perspective. What can I gain from this level of discomfort? How can I self-reflect on this? Um, and I think your mindset is so important. If you kind of feel negative going into a session, that's the experience that you'll have coming back out of it. So if you can go in with like positive mindset of what are we both gaining from this and how have I found this helpful, you will find something helpful within each session.
I think that's great advice, and I really like what you spoke about, in terms of the mutuality of what you also gain as a peer supporter when you're in a peer relationship. And I think what you spoke about really, it reminds me of there's something there about just being authentic. And I think part of authenticity is, recognizing when things maybe aren't going as well or when there is that discomfort and sort of, having the bravery to be able to acknowledge that, whether that's just internally, whether that's through conversations with your manager, or if it's actually directly in a conversation with your peer and just taking that opportunity to check in, and see how things are for them. And I'm a great believer that, most things can be resolved with a conversation. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it is so important to have these open conversations and to allow yourself to become comfortable in sharing parts of yourself. And that can be a bit of a work in progress. So I think another sort of nugget that I would give to people doing peer support is if you feel like you're not quite there yet, don't give up on it. Don't feel like you're not doing a good job. It's a journey for you as well as your peers. It's a learning curve. And, you have to stick with it. You have to give yourself time to evolve into the kind of peer worker that you want to be. And you gain strengths for every person that you meet. You will gain something from them as much as they'll gain something from you.